And I'm Dave Palmetier, thrilled to be with you today, live at noon, sitting in for Jay Moberg. Just briefly, Jay will be back in just a few minutes, but I'm very pleased because our old friend Scott Alarik is here with Jake Armerding, and it's a very auspicious occasion because we're just about set on the brink of the release of Scott's new novel. And I have to compliment you on being a person of a certain age, doing their first novel. I mean, I think that requires a lot of guts.
Well, thank you. Yes.
Could you do a reading from the book and
Sure.
And could you set it up a little bit for us? Because this book is a lot about context.
Yes, it is, and it's set in the modern Boston folk scene, a love story of two songwriters, one middle-aged guy who thinks of himself as basically as a failure because he had a real good shot at major label stardom, and the album was recorded and never released because of the staff shakeup at the label. It's a tragically common story in the music industry. So he thinks of himself as just a loser and a failure. He hosts open mics and jam sessions at a seedy little bar in North Cambridge called Dooley's, and the young female songwriter Kit Palmer is very talented, very attractive, very charismatic, but she has none of the other things that she needs to be able to have the career she wants to have. And the music kind of draws these two together. This is a scene very early in the book at the jam session where he's encouraged her she grew up doing fiddle contests and to get back into that kind of fun of social music. But there's this guy singing the song Colorado Trail, and Nathan likes to just sit and think about the music a lot. So I'll read this little bit and then do the song so people can kind of tune into that. Bobbing his head lightly to the beat, Nathan closed his eyes and wondered what it was about sad songs that appeal to us so much. Do we like being sad? Even the up-tempo songs at the jam were usually about train wrecks, dead mothers, ghastly murders, and ghostly lovers walking these hills in long black veils. Maybe it's like those actors who say they prefer playing villains because they're more interesting. Our dark feelings have more complex palettes. At least in art they do. But Nathan had learned that form usually follows function in traditional music. Perhaps our unhappy feelings are more in need of examining than our happy ones. Who needs to solve happiness? We need to understand the dark sides of life. That's where the dangers are. Why else would cowboys have sung all those sad love songs? It was the one time they could display their inner selves, explore their feelings, and share them with friends. And those deeper feelings need attention, even on a cattle drive. Leave them alone too long, unexamined and unexpressed, and they fester like an untreated wound. Maybe that's why Colorado Trail leads us away from the particulars about Laura and the cowboy. Laura becomes everybody's absent love, and the cowboy's loneliness becomes everybody's loneliness. And doesn't the simple act of sharing that in a song make us a little less lonely? Nathan opened his eyes because he heard Kit's voice. On the final chorus, she'd stopped fiddling and was adding a high vocal harmony. It was the first time he'd heard her sing at the jam, and he smiled. The magic of the jam was working. She and the music were becoming friends again. Eyes like a morning star, cheeks like a rose. Laura was a pretty girl, everybody knows. Weep all ye falling rains, whale winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. Ride through the lonely night, ride through the day. Keep that herd moving on its way. Weep all ye falling rains, whale winds wail, all along the Colorado Trail. Ride through the stormy night, dark is the sky. Wish I'd stayed another where it's muddy, warm and dry. Weep all ye falling graves, where winds wail, all along, along the Colorado Trail. Face like a prairie flower laughing all the day. Laurel was a pretty girl, now she's gone away. Weep all ye falling graves, where winds wail, all along, along the Colorado Trail. Weep all ye falling graves, where winds wail, all along, along the Colorado Trail. All along, the Colorado Trail. All along, the Colorado Trail.
That is Scott Alarik reading from and doing one of the songs mentioned in his new book, Revival, a folk music novel. Now, there are a lot of events that are going on around the release of this book. A lot of events taking place in Harvard Square, which we'll get to in a moment. But I want to talk about the book briefly, and I've got a really simple question. Did you intend to write a novel?
Yes, I did. After my first book came out, Deep Community,
Yeah.
Adventures in the Modern Folk Underground, which is a series of nonfiction articles and interviews and stories about the modern folk world, I felt like there are some truths you need fiction to tell. And that in all my years covering folk music for the Boston Globe and Public Radio and Sing Out Magazine and other places, writing stories about folk musicians and about important moments in folk music, most of the things that I wasn't able to tell are the things we get from the music, the emotional things, what it feels like to live in a world like the modern folk world, a world that still defines itself by tradition, and it's and a world in which community is a very powerful, active word. I'm so in love with the people who keep folk music going. People like WUMB. It's like folk music is almost by necessity a labor of love because there's no other benefit.
Well, let me repeat the old joke. There are dollars to be made in folk music.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And as Utah Phillips said, the only way to wind up with $1 million in folk music is to start out with 2.
And when Whitey Bulger was captured, I said that he was stupid because if he wanted to remain hidden, he should have just gone into folk music.
Yes, that's right. He should have become
and
an
nobody
open mic
would.
host.
Right, exactly. No one would ever be able to find him.
Right. So I wanted to try to just show people what this world is like, what it's like to live in this world, and to tell a love story about people who, it's a love story about these 2 songwriters, Nathan Warren and Kit Palmer, but every bit as much I like to think of it as a love story about the folk music world, how it got to be the way it is today, and how it functions. In fact, I dedicated the book to the volunteers, without whom, as I said, there would be no story to tell, because if they didn't do all of that work, we just wouldn't have places to sing, people like Jake and me.
And we can say the same thing about WUMB, and we thank our volunteers as well.
Absolutely. Folk radio is going to be so important to helping spread the word about this. So we actually made a special CD of readings that Jake set to music for me, so that folk radio could actually have some tracks to play on the air, because folk radio is like the town crier and the town hall for this world. And if it wasn't for public radio, I don't know how this music would still be existing, because it's the only place in the radio that you can hear it.
Now, the people in the book are fictional, but there are real people who do end up appearing in the book, right?
Yes, there are. Like one of the things I say at the very beginning, that the characters are fictional and not intended to resemble any real persons. But as I put it, the stories about actual folk musicians are true as far as I know. And actually, that's not a bad segue.
Well, thank you very much. I was wondering if you might be willing to do a reading for us.
Yes. This is one of those. As you can imagine, anybody who's familiar with my writing or over the years at the Boston Globe probably knows that I wasn't going to be able to pass up the opportunity in a novel to be able to stuff in some of my favorite folk music stories. And this is one of those that Jake set to music, about one of the great bluesmen of all time. Ready? For weeks, Nathan had been jotting down his favorite stories about folk music. Not necessarily the most important ones, but the fun ones, the odd, mysterious, and revealing ones, the ones that felt like secrets. There was a story he'd heard about the old Texas blues legend Lightnin' Hopkins. He had a few minor R&B hits in the 40s, right around the time rhythm and blues was getting its name. What Hopkins took away from the experience, more than anything, was that he should never trust a white man with a pen in his hand. And so the story goes, one fine day, Lightnin' found his cupboards bare. It was the dawn of the 60s folk revival, and several small record labels had expressed interest in recording him again. He always said no, but now he needed the money. He got in his car and drove to New York, the Big Apple, Gotham, the city so nice they named it twice. Arriving at one of the labels, he told them he would record for them, but he would not sign anything and would not accept a check. Cash only, one payment, and a bottle of gin. Of course, the right thing would have been to say, "Oh no, Mr. Hopkins, that will cost you a lot of money. Think of the royalties, sir." But the label would get to keep those royalties, so they scurried to the bank and came back with a few $1,000s in a big brown envelope and a bottle of gin. He opened both, put one in his pocket, the other in his mouth, and sang them 12 songs, all in 1 or 2 takes. "Everybody happy?" he said when he was through. Everybody nodded, so he left, got in his car, checked his address book, and drove to the next label that had asked about recording him. He made them the same proposition, got the same deal, and drinking their gin and stuffing their big envelope in his pocket, sang them the same 12 songs. He repeated this process with 5 or 6 other labels over the next few days, then drove home to Houston and restocked his cupboards. Nathan didn't know if the story was true, but he hoped it was. He did know there were a curious number of Lightnin' Hopkins records from the early 60s that featured different versions of the same songs.
Scott Alarik with Jake Armerding reading from his new novel, Revival. Now, the actual release concert, I guess, for the, and I it's hard to think of a book having a release concert, but
but this one will.
The release concert for it is on the 15th at Club Passy.
Yes, and I've got some great local folk luminaries that have agreed to join me, including Jake Armerding and Ellis Paul, Meg Hutchinson, and Alistair Mook, and we're just going to have a good old hootenanny, just kind of an Alistair Mook style Pastures of Plenty song swap and hootenanny, and I will occasionally interrupt the proceedings to discharge a reading in the general direction of the audience. And we're gonna have a lot of fun. But it seemed like that having a music party was the perfect way to launch this book. But also, I'm just so thrilled that the Harvard Square community has really embraced this book, and the Harvard Square Business Association has officially named September Revival Month in Harvard Square, tying the release of the novel and the release music party to a number of events that are happening in September that all kind of fit this idea of not so much, evoking old things, but of traditions that are in a constant state of renewal and revival, like the tonight the Bread and Puppet Theater, September 2nd, the Bread and Puppet Theater is returning to Cambridge Common, where they used to do concerts or shows back in the early 70s, and I'll be sort of emceeing that. And then there's we're doing an outdoor concert on September 8th, on Palmer Street, and then there's the Club Passim novel release show, which I should say I'm very proud is being co-sponsored by the Harvard Bookstore, one of the great independent bookstores in the world, and I'm really proud that they're going to be part of this. And then on September 17th, there's an urban agricultural fair, which is another tradition that is being renewed down in Harvard Square
on a weekly basis.
And we're going to have an outdoor concert, as Passim is going to host an outdoor concert with Jake and Meg Hutchinson, and is Alistair going to be?
I thought it was Alistair. Yeah.
That, and also Matt and Shannon Heaton, the great Irish musicians, are going to be part of that, and we're going to be, and I'll be hosting that again, and then. On September 25th, the Cambridge Center of Adult Education, which couldn't resist the opportunity to get on this, is going to host a classic old-fashioned hootenanny with Lorraine and Bennett Hammond and Michael Ciccone and myself and whoever else happens to drop by with a good old song to sing. And then let's see, what's next? I'm out.
October 2nd. I mean, it's Oktoberfest. Come on.
Yes, Oktoberfest on October 2nd will be the final Revival Month event, and again, Passim will be hosting an outdoor stage, and I'll be emceeing that and offering a couple little readings. And I am just so proud, because this is a book that's very much about the Cambridge folk scene, and Harvard Square is in the book very prominently, and I'm proud and thrilled that the Harvard Square community is embracing that, and the fact that there's never been a novel about the folk world that's really set in the folk world before. A lot of places, like if I was in New York, they'd be saying, "Yeah, well, this is not a genre. This isn't even a genre, you know." And here, they're just, the fact that it's new and old at the same time, because it's folk music and there's never been a novel about it, is a cause for celebration and excitement, and that just makes me so proud to live here.
Now, if somebody's looking for more information about all these events, is there one place that they can find it?
Yes, harvardsquare.com. And if they want to find out about the book, they can either Google Revival Alarik and find it pretty quick, or they can go to my website, which is scottalaric.com.
Perhaps you guys would like to do something else for us? I see Jake still has his guitar in place.
Yeah, Jake, would you do a song for us?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is one I haven't recorded yet. It's pretty new, but I thought it'd fit well. Said Catchy Paul to Dreamy John, "Hey mate, your band looks bloody fun. Come on and join, we'll have a ball." Said Dreamy John to Catchy Paul. Said Dreamy John to Catchy Paul, "Your Michelle is unenthralled. Tell her you love her, we say bon." Said Catchy Paul to Dreamy John. Well, listen, I'll be black, you be white. I'll go left and you swing right, and all of the songs we'll sing as one. Catchy Paul and Dreamy John. Heaven knows with this long and winding road will come to end, so it is just the best to be the best of friends. Extra, extra, name your price. It's Dreamy John versus Jesus Christ. Little ones to him belonged, but now they follow Dreamy John. In colored coats of silk they stand, Sergeant Pepper's Hearts Club Band, but underneath an English horn, something's gone from Dreamy John. It's Coke and Yoko on his brain. John missed the turn for Penny Lane, and Paul is left alone with his irreconcilable differences. Heaven knows where this long and winding road will come to end. So it goes. Sometimes it gets so hard to be the best of friends. Well, I hate your songs, I hate your keys, I hate your pretty melodies, and all of the words, but most of all, God, I hate you, catchy Paul. Dark and cold, those gates of hell. There's heartbreak at the old hotel. Blackbird sings a mournful song. Rest in peace, Dreamy John. And heaven knows if there was still a chance that they would see. So it goes. Sometimes the best of friends had best just let it be. And in the end, this much was true. They took our love and they made some too, and all of the songs will carry on. Catchy Paul and Dreamy John. Oh, now they're here and now they're gone. Catchy Paul. John.
That's Jake Armerding with us here on WUMB. I have to admit that it took me about half a verse to get up to speed on that. I wasn't sure where you were going, but
That's okay.
and the realization was absolutely wonderful. I have to say that.
And Jake, you have a show coming up at Passim too, right?
I do, September 30th. It's a Friday, and I'm so lucky when I get to rope in some people from the scene that you're talking about. People like Mark Orelli and Zach Hickman. Zach Hickman's a fantastic bass player, and
he has the best mustache in folk music.
And the best mustache probably in most of music.
That's saying something.
Genres aside, he's got it covered. And you probably heard of Mark Orelli.
Yeah, somewhere. He's a kid who used to live in my neighborhood, you know?
They'll both be on the show, along
Notes
with some special
will
guests.
be picked when those two are
Yeah.
going back and forth.
So September 30th, come on out.
And that fits very well with the Revival Month in Harvard Square, presented in conjunction with loads of folks like Club Passim. And is it the Harvard Business Association? Is that what the organization?
The Harvard Square Business Association, yeah.
And all the information about all the events, including the book release at Club Passim on the 15th with Jake and with Mook and the like, that's available on their website, which is
which is harvardsquare.com. Yes.
Or you can look at scottalarick.com for more information about the book and all. Congratulations! I have to admit that I'm kind of amazed that no one has done this before. But if there was somebody who was going to do it, I'm darn glad it was you.
Well, thanks.
Because let's just put it this way: having been around this scene for 25 years, is ridiculous. For 40 years, you at least I trust. Somebody else could have made a hash of it.
Thanks.
Have you got one more reading you got for us?
Oh, this really shows how the Cambridge is almost. Some people have said it's almost like a character in the novel, and I'm really delighted that people outside this area, they think folk music and it's set in Cambridge and Boston, and they think, oh, that's perfect. So this is Nathan's just walking into Harvard Square one day. Nathan left his house in the late afternoon, looking forward to a lazy stroll into Harvard Square. As he turned out of the driveway and onto Craigie Street, he was struck by the colors of early summer, the garish greens and reds and yellows. He looked at the tight row of grand old colonial homes across the street. It had kind of an impressionist painting feel, the colors soft and yet distinct. One home was heather green with emerald shutters, another ice cream white with a playful maraschino roof. A bright yellow house stood beside a slate gray one, almost as if one was in the sun, the other in shadow. His favorite was a ribbon candy purple with twinkly blue shutters. It looked like it should have a slot for coins in the roof. As Craigie crept closer to the square, the houses got smaller and more Victorian. It was a remarkable change, like watching time itself stroll from one era to another. At the precise moment he passed from colonial to Victorian, the air was overtaken by the whirring of nearby Mass Ave, Cambridge's main artery. The sound of birds and children playing was displaced by the mechanical din of traffic, automobile horns, and a distant jackhammer. It's the way New York City sounds all the time, that continuous breath of mechanical motion. At 4 a.m, you can open a Manhattan window and hear the same whirring and wheezing like a low and endless sigh. They call New York the city that never sleeps. It's really just the city that never shuts up. Nathan turned right, away from the noise and onto tiny Berkeley Street. It was a nice moment, and he always listened for it. Just as the whir and honk of the city began to disturb the peace of Craigie, he ducked down another quiet, leafy street. He told himself this was a shortcut, an insider's secret path to the square. But he knew it was roughly the same distance. Its advantage was keeping him tucked away within the quiet back roads of old Cambridge. He liked the architectural jumble of Berkeley Street, a mix of colonials, Victorians, and stone and ivy homes from the early 1900s. There was something that felt right and proper about things that were of their own times, standing unapologetically next to things of other times. Something balanced, settled, real. We are what we are, their confident shadows seemed to say. Balanced and settled, but in the glorious mixed-up way that life is balanced. He stopped and looked up and down the street. He'd never thought about it that way before, but that's why he enjoyed this little street so much, with its cacophony of architecture. It felt like life happening the way it actually does, the way a forest has small new trees sprouting up in the shadows of grand old ones. Life is never all of one time or another. Never all of one time or another. That's what the old songs tell him, isn't it? As they make him feel what the first singer felt and what every singer afterward has felt. There is no such thing as a new moment. Every moment contains every moment that came before it. He stood still, head cocked down toward the street, eyes closed, hands stuffed in his pockets, thinking about that.
Scott Alarik reading from his new novel, Revival. release events around Harvard Square all month, starting this very evening, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
Come to him about Jake Armerding, who will, in addition to appearing at a number of these events, will be at Club Passim with Aurelian Hickman. On the 30th.
30th of September.
Yeah.
And the big official revival launch at Club Passim, September 15th, with me and Jake and Ellis Paul, Meg Hutchinson, and Alistair Mook. It'll be a real party.
Look for more information at harvardsquare.com and more information on the novel itself, the book itself, at scottalaric.com. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for having us, Dave.